I was either naive or ahead of the curve. I'll let you decide which. We're a sales consultancy, been around for about 3 years, but it got to the point where we were so big and I was doing things I didn't want to do that I just realised I was really bored. It was a bit of a hunch. I just took a bit of a punt and thought I'd put myself out there.
At what point in that journey do you think it's time for them to draw a line in the sand and say, my business is now not going to be a founder-led sales business?
I think it's a great question. I think
Tom Bright is the founder and director of Bright Evolve and director at The Talent World, bringing 20 plus years of B2B sales and growth leadership. He helps scaling organizations build profitable, repeatable, and sustainable revenue engines across the UK and US.
We've been able to build a team and build out some additional service offerings. My goal with everything that I do with the company is to actually build something that I can hand on to my kids.
What's next for you and for Bright Evolve? What is the plan?
So I think...
Welcome back to Founders Stories, and today I am so delighted that I have somebody on the show who I can talk to about go-to-market for the next 40 minutes because we essentially do the same thing. I'm delighted to welcome today Tom Bright from Bright Evolve. Welcome, Tom, to Founders Stories.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really pleased to connect with you outside of the podcast. It's great to speak to other sales leaders who are, I suppose, I don't want to dress it up too much, but I suppose we're changing the mold in terms of how people, particularly startups and founders, can craft their go-to-market strategy and changing the perceptions around having to hire a perm team, right? So I've kind of given the game away a bit there, but tell us about Bright Evolve and what it is that you guys do.
Yep. So we're a sales consultancy. We've been around for about 3 years. We basically work with early stage businesses. That's our market. And in essence, we've got to kind of take founders through a 3-stage process. Stage 1, we'll assess where they're at right now and assess them against kind of 6 pillars of growth, help them build a sales strategy, consult with them to implement that, and maybe provide some like fractional support. And then ultimately the end point is we'll help them to hire and onboard their sales team, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's 3 years old now.
3 years, yeah, coming up to 3 years, yeah.
Yeah. And how have you found the perception of what you do has changed within that time from maybe being seen as interim support into a really important supplier, essentially?
Yeah, I think it's we're still on that journey, I'd say. I think there's a lot of education we've got to do with the businesses that we work with, right? So they're typically founder-led businesses. The founders had some success, but they don't know how to build that in a kind of repeatable and scalable way. And no one sets out running a business unless you're kind of experienced in sales to think, I need to be a salesperson. I need to think about sales. There's a lot of education we've got to do. Definitely a kind of, first year of business was me doing all the consulting and the hustling and, putting myself out there. And then thankfully we've been able to build a team and, build out some additional service offerings so that we now are starting to be seen more as an actual consultancy with an end point in mind, importantly.
Yeah. And you probably network in a lot of fractional spaces, as I do as well. How have you found the community of fractional sales leaders has changed from, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but for me, I've found that those groups used to consist of maybe 80% of people who were on the perm market and 20% that enjoyed having the contract live. And now that table is completely turned to wouldn't entertain a perm job because actually they're building a business, not offering interim support. Do you find a similar kind of thing in your network?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's I actually think it's great how the fractional model has just kind of erupted over the last few years, especially. The first client we picked up and I picked up personally was in the US, and they were much more used to the kind of fractional model,
Right,
basically.
okay.
But actually then we've kind of seen that grow more in the UK as well.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it's great because I think there's people out there who've got real value to add, but certainly for the sort of businesses I work with and we work with, they couldn't afford a full-time permanent sales director at the point of their journey, especially when there's so many unanswered questions about strategy, etc. So actually the fractional model works really well in that regard.
What made you decide to go into it at a time 3 years ago where, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've done it because I've seen this hockey stick and I want a piece of the action. I'm really honest about that. But 3 years ago, that hadn't really started to materialize. So what made you go into doing something like this?
I was either naive or ahead of the curve. I'll let you decide which. I'm pretty sure it was naive. Basically, I was a permanent sales director at the time. I was working for a digital learning business. We'd had like 10x growth over kind of 4 years. It was all, the sort of stuff that a lot of people love on their CVs. Been bought, we'd bought other companies. There've been loads of exciting stuff basically. But it got to the point where we were so big and I was doing things I didn't want to do that I just realized I was really bored, basically. So it was a really selfish decision, first and foremost. I was like, I think there's a world, it was a bit of a hunch. I think there's a world where founders and early stage businesses, because that's all I'd ever worked with through my permanent career, need help, don't understand sales, don't understand commercial growth. There's aspects they have never had experience. So I just took a bit of a punt and thought I'd put myself out there. And then, it's kind of, thankfully, I've been able to kind of evolve the model of the business at the same time as that kind of hockey stick that you talk about
Yeah.
has landed, basically.
And I think as a sales director or a CRO, you do have a bit of an advantage when it comes to actually then taking the leap into being a founder, because you know how to grow a business. If you've been around in startup, you know where the skeletons are. You're the one who's always had a target on your back for the last. So you've always carried the can as well. So you're used to that level of responsibility. So you are ahead of the game compared to somebody coming from a different department that wants to set up their own business. But there are still real differences between being a full-time employee versus a founder. So for you coming out of a very secure job as a sales director into founder life, where did you see the kind of the key surprises?
I think it's learning all the other bits. So, like the bit about making money in a permanent sales director role or as an individual contributor, whatever role I was in, I knew I could make a business money, right? That was one thing I've always been really good at. I would often then hand things off, right? So finance, delivery, IT, there's stuff that I kind of had a knowledge of, but I didn't have to worry too much about. Now, as a founder, all of that lands at my door, basically. So I've got to think about not just making money, but what we're spending the money on and what we're doing around IT, what we're doing around operations, how we're delivering work, what we're doing around, marketing. I've always worked really closely with marketing professionals in the past. Now we need to do podcasts and stuff. So it's actually having that kind of full rounded picture, which to be honest, I think I'm a better sales leader now because of that in the last few years.
100% agree with that. I actually feel like I want to put out a public apology to all of the CFOs that I've ever worked with as a sales leader for being such an arse. Because now that I am the CFO,
Yeah.
essentially, because I'm doing everything, I understand where they were coming from. So it makes you, I think, makes you better at the job. If I was to go back into full-time employment now as a CRO, I think my relationship with the rest of the C-suite or the CFO and everybody else would be better than what it's been before, because you have a much wider lens, right?
Yeah, you're better than me. I'm definitely not apologizing to any past CFOs. So, but yeah, absolutely. You can understand everything that goes into it,
Yeah,
basically.
totally. Yeah, really good. And so let's talk about your sales director career then. Let's go all the way back to some fun with it. Like, what were you like at kind of school? Are you a natural born salesperson, extroverted? Like, talk to us about your journey.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty extrovert. I was in like drama club and, reasonably popular and stuff at school and all that sort of stuff, I suppose. But to be honest with you, I was not great academically. I was certainly smart, but I get quite bored. I was just didn't really kind of apply myself. And I just basically wanted to get out of there as soon as I could and start earning money.
Was it the money,
So
do you think?
I think it was like, the hustle, the
Yeah,
kind of get out there, earn the cash.
yeah,
Didn't necessarily have a lot as kids.
yeah.
So it was first kind of opportunity I got. I was out of the school system
What do
and
you think,
into making
what were
money.
your influences there that you saw that maybe you thought, I want that life?
We didn't grow up with a lot of cash at home. We were definitely on the kind of the poorer side of the street. But actually also I had enough influences in my life that I could see there were ways to make money and the difference that could take. So I've just always believed that actually hard work will help you get somewhere. And so I was out of school and into the working world, basically.
I think that's one of the things that having a not so privileged background secretly teaches you. You don't realize it at the time. You just think it's not fair because everyone else has got nicer trainers. But what it's actually secretly doing is it's building that view that if you want something, you actually have to go and work for it. And it gives you a certain appetite for risk as well, because you know what it's like to have nothing. So when you envisage yourself back in that situation, it's scary enough to make you not want to do it again, but it's not too scary that it's the unknown. So it's actually, I suppose, I don't know, you tell me I'm wrong, but I imagine it's something that you could maybe attribute to some of your success.
I think so. I think there's It's a real fine balance, right? Because I think all through my career, there's been moments in the night, in the middle of the night, where I'll wake up and I'm like, I'm just going to get sacked, or I'm going to be on the street, and it's always in the back of my mind. And so there are moments in the middle of the night where that is kind of debilitating,
Yeah.
not very enjoyable. But actually, if I think what I've learned, and I certainly with my sales career, I'd always thought if I can channel that fear into actually energy and drive in the right way, that results will come. And yeah, it held me in reasonably good stead. It's not the only reason, but it's definitely something at play from
Yeah.
previous lives for sure.
I think so, and it's, that kind of early, and I'm not saying you've come from particularly traumatic background, but it is a sense of that kind of early trauma, that does come back to bite you every now and again, and it's not fun, having that fear that it's a real pain when you're on holiday or you're trying to have some time off or not think about work or whatever. It's like people say take a break, and they say that, and you're like, well, you don't know what you're saying, because it's actually not mentally possible for me to do that. So totally, totally kind of with you on that one. But I suppose on the flip side, that has driven what has become a really successful sales career for you. So talk to us about your early sales career. So Tom as a kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, what, SDR, AE when you first
No,
started?
I started out in recruitment.
Ah, right, okay.
So yeah, I
Yeah, I
worked.
think I knew that actually. Yes, of
Yeah,
course,
so I
yeah.
worked for one of the kind of big names in recruitment at the time. I mean, this is obviously some time ago now. I was reminded that I was very fortunate because I didn't have a degree behind me. I was told I was very fortunate to get the job,
It
and
must be Hayes then.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought I was like 11 grand a year, take it, that's your thing, and
You're lucky to be
and yeah,
offered.
be
Yeah,
thankful that
yeah.
you're here, kind of thing. I did a couple of years doing that, really just didn't like it, but learned quite a lot. So, and then I moved into consultancy from there, in a kind of business development role. So yeah, kind of BDR, but quickly moved into BDM. Actually, quite early in my career, like I was quite young when I moved into management and leadership within sales, basically. So yeah, didn't necessarily take a conventional route through to that point.
Yeah. And how much of what you learned or what you practiced as an operator do you now teach or coach to your clients? Have you had to definitely coming from recruitment, I suppose there's a lot of a way that we sell as recruiters. I was an ex-recruiter as well, and some of what I learned, I would never tell my clients to sell that way. But then there's good in every single piece of learning, as you say. So how much of what you've learned as a seller and as a recruiter do you now teach, or is it more kind of the things that you didn't do correctly, or the things that you should have done that you now teach?
Yeah, I think in my later years, I've got much better at wrapping the kind of theory, science, the process around some of those things which instinctively just have to do in your early career, like work hard, push the activity, don't take no for an answer, all that stuff you do kind of early in the career. Thankfully, now I kind of wrap process and structure, and kind of can, when I'm coaching founders, I can talk to them about the why we're doing this, right,
Yes.
and how do we get to that point, basically. I do think if you've not been in that kind of sales environment and you've not kind of been thrust into that, it's really hard to learn some of those skills and to figure out, oh, actually, yeah, the more I put in, the more I'm going to get out, and how to focus efforts in the right way, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that early career stuff that I think is just now quite instinctive within what I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try as much as I can to get that across to clients, or some of that stuff I can see eyes glazing over when I'm talking. So
I can too, but I also think that it's very important and almost a duty that we have as fractionals, as I suppose the way that the world is going, we should be, and I don't mean this as disrespect to any permanent CROs or sales directors, but in theory, we should be a cutter, but like we should be able to very, very quickly go into a company, fix stuff straight away, and make very difficult decisions, when actually if we were perm, we'd probably just sit on probation for 6 months and work things out and do our 30, 60, 90-day plan. You can't do a 30, 60, 90-day plan when you're fractional. You have a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day plan. So you need to be very, very good. So let's get away with the stigma of a fractional is less quality. It actually should be higher in terms of quality. And because we want to be seen as higher quality, I think we almost have a duty to really educate founders, CEOs, and CFOs as to that. You mentioned like the science and the process of sales, because if we just went in and said, I know what you should do. You should work harder. We probably can't really command our day rate for doing that. So, how have you found that has landed in your clients? And if you think about kind of who's listening to this, there is a lot of founders and people who are building businesses who don't yet have that rigor and process around their go-to-market strategy. So, yeah, how have you found that in your network?
It's something kind of identified quite early on when we started the business. And I think what was kind of happening quite often is businesses would come to us and say, right, we need more leads. We need more top of funnel, help us. We're not getting enough people to know about our product, or, we're not making enough money from the deals. Then they'd come in with a very fixed idea of this is the problem we're trying to solve in sales. So quite early on, actually, we designed this kind of six pillar diagnostic that will take everybody through, so that we can really understand. We don't work with anybody until we in through that assessment,
Yeah.
but you can really understand where are your hotspots, where are your blind spots, what are the issues. And so we're almost starting that period of education from the very first engagement, because every client looks at it as, oh, I didn't even think about how do I, what's my sales process, and I've got the best process to convert the leads that are coming in.
Yeah.
I'll be pricing in the right way,
Yeah.
etc. So because of sort of starting that period of education, and that gives us a framework to then start working with them on. So yeah, that's really important
Yeah.
to me
Is
and
that
to us.
pre-sale or is that the first part of the engagement once they've signed
It's a
and
paid for
yeah,
exercise.
yeah.
It's actually an online
Just in case
system.
anyone's thinking I'm gonna get one of them out of him.
Yeah,
You have to pay for it, guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we've tried to make it really competitive, really affordable. It's an online system now, which
Yeah.
we're kind of developing in the background as well, so it
Right.
becomes more intuitive. But ultimately, we want to be able to kind of say to fans, you self-serve, tell all your problems, and then we'll work with you to build that strategy
Yeah.
out, basically. So, and I think that just does exactly what you say. It allows us, when we start working together, to really get in on the hotspots and start adding the value. I think the other reason that's important is because founders will move, like, on what's the biggest problem. They will move from one bit to the next, basically, right? So this week, problem A might be the biggest issue that's keeping them awake. Next week, they'll have forgotten about that and they'll be on problem B. And we need something that we can take them back to as a baseline to say, this is what we said we'd do. If we're going to deter from that, we need a really good reason to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good because we're teaching them things like how to develop mutual action plans with their prospects. So it's almost like teaching them how to live their own process internally. And you get much, much better at selling when actually the things that you're doing, you're also doing internally. So having a plan for things and holding yourselves accountable and all of those things you can then replicate in your sales process. And what does a typical project look like for you? Is it you as a sales director? Do you tend to have, because you mentioned you've got a team now, right? You're growing the business. Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, so we've got a small permanent team that kind of supports, they play kind of supporting roles, really. So they do some of the work kind of behind the scenes. And then we use some associates that will kind of come in and help deliver some of the work, client facing, basically. It will typically, at the minute, always start with me and my involvement. And I suppose, that's one of the kind of pieces we've got to kind of fix as we grow, is how do we kind of make that not the case?
It's
But
a conundrum,
yeah,
isn't it?
I mean, my name is literally above the door, so I have
It
to
is
try and figure that
literally
out.
above the door. Yeah, you're probably I'm probably even better than you in that respect because I was taking my name out of it. But and it's also testament to the fact that people are obviously, there's a huge trust element. They're going to start burning through that investment pretty soon, and they're taking a bit of a risk. And if they talk to you and you tell them that you've got them and you've got their backs, what they don't want is someone else to turn up on Monday or turn up on a Zoom call or whatever.
Exactly.
They want you. So it is always going to be a conundrum as this kind of fractional world evolves and we go from being fractional operators essentially into having companies. I didn't start this journey to work by myself. I very much want to grow the business into a really good consultancy. But first of all, I need to figure out that bit, which is how do I make it not about me and about the others. But you're further along with that because you've managed to get some people in and you call them associates, right? So this is a collaboration. How have you met them? Have you just come across them, or you're a great AE or you're great?
No, most of them are kind of through my network.
Yeah.
So again, there's a kind of scale limit to that thus far. I'm fortunate that the world I was in many years ago was in that consultancy world, and we used a model heavily based on associates, basically. So you'd have your kind of core permanent team, and then you'd build that with some really well trusted associates who'd onboard as though they're part of the team, but they still get the freedom of being their own person, basically.
I love that. It's a really, really good model.
So I think if we can kind of replicate that,
Yeah.
That's great. And I think, the important piece that we've really introduced this year is that piece where we say we're going to help you to hire and onboard your sales team. And that's a paid for, that's paid for exercise. We'll charge a recruitment fee, we'll charge an onboarding fee, but it'll be a lot cheaper than, kind of recruitment agencies.
Yes.
But it's almost putting our kind of marker in the sand with every client that there's an end point and we're working towards that end point.
Definitely. My whole goal is to make myself as redundant as possible in most of my clients. And some of that will be, putting in a sales leader to replace me. Sometimes, and I don't know whether you found this. In fact, I suppose it's a good question. How have you found founders at sales? Because we talk about this. We've coined this phrase like founder-led sales. It means different things to different people. Some people think it means that they don't have a sales team and therefore they're doing the sales. For me, it's almost a methodology of selling that's very, very hard to replicate by an AE and therefore not scalable because it sits with one person who's able to promise the earth and is probably a fantastically charismatic individual who. So how have you found your founders at sales, and how have you kept them involved in the go-to-market strategy?
It's a great question. So a lot of the work we do is around kind of figuring out, okay, what is that process moving on? That means it's not all on you, but you're still involved at
Yes.
those key parts, right? And we have to really understand that. And that's a lot about understanding what the strengths of that founder, what's worked thus well with clients, what's not worked, what's not worked, what don't they want to do? And then figuring out how do we put the resource and the systems around you as a founder so that you only do kind of things you want to be doing and they're good at doing, but also that allows you to run the rest of the business as well, right? So bringing you in at the right point in the sales process, or, qualifying opportunities properly so that you're kind of being brought into that, actually managing expectations with the prospect that they're not going to see you all of the time, but it's really important to you that you get involved at key touch points. So actually by that way, you're kind of empowering the AE or SDR, whoever it is that's involved in the sales process, and they're not just seen as a kind of lesser substitute, basically. The challenge is when we start working with founders and they kind of quite quickly make it clear they just want to step away from sales
Yeah,
completely.
they've had enough.
They've had enough,
Yeah.
or they don't think they're very good at it.
Yeah.
So actually we really do a lot of work about trying to break down, well, what successes have you had? Talk to us about these clients, talk to them about your involvement in
Yeah.
that. Get them to say, actually, there was a role you played in that you can't afford to not have,
Yeah.
probably for quite some time, probably longer than you expect and hope for.
The ones that want to move out of sales, what do you find they want to do instead?
They want to do the stuff that they're maybe more comfortable doing. So whether that's they come from a product background or a dev background.
More on the tech side.
Yeah, or, want to be out in front of customers, but in the delivery side. People naturally want to go where they feel more comfortable. And nobody starts a business really thinking, oh, do I have to do the things I don't want to do for the rest of my life? So, as founders, we're all eager and anxious to get to that point to go, what's my, kind of exit strategy a little bit, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
managing some expectations about it will come, but it's not yet, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you as a you're a founder now. So what's your go-to-market strategy like? Do you find that you end up falling into some of the traps that you see the very people that you work with? So it's an easy thing I definitely do. I definitely do. So where are those kind of skeletons? Where are the pitfalls of that founder journey that you've probably fallen down yourself and you see other founders fall down, just so that anyone that's listening can kind of watch out for that? What are the things that they're doing that's probably maybe a little bit of a faux pas?
I think definitely I've gone through periods where I've spent too much time working in the business and not thinking enough about like the business stuff, the strategy, what is our go-to-market approach, what we're going to do. So actually I just end up instinctively doing a lot of stuff, and the team are kind of actually looking around me going, like, Tom, we can do some of this, like help us out. What's the strategy? What's the direction? You're just off running ahead, basically. And I see founders do that all the time, basically. I definitely don't take enough time out of the business to sit down and go, what are we doing? What direction are we going? What's the strategy? And calling in help from others to help me do that, which is ironic because that is literally the role I end up playing with so many of our clients, right? So, and so it's the big thing. That's probably the thing that keeps me awake at night. Is I know I need to do it. But it's, like everyone, it's finding the time and prioritizing it, basically.
I had a guest on previously, Mike, who was a super connector and had been to thousands and thousands of networking events and would highly recommend them to all founders. There's so many for founders. So many. You could literally be breakfast, lunch and dinner. You could basically eat your way through the week at these networking events. And what he was saying was, because I said to him, how would you Is it also, but I sometimes book in for the events and then I'm like, "Oh, I'm too busy, I can't do it," and I'll cancel because it's seen as a bit of a luxury. I always have this guilt from like, "Oh, I've got to get the train to London and got to go and talk to people." It seems like a bit of a luxury, and he just completely shot me down on that and was like, "Actually, it's a really important part, not because you might do a deal or because of who you might meet, but because it's fun and it's uplifting and it's really important for your kind of well-being." I don't know about you, but I'm terrible at looking after myself as a founder. I do train, and that's like a non-negotiable, and I eat well, but massages, well-being, just doing things because they're fun has kind of taken a backseat over the last 18 months. And I'm guessing it probably is with you as well because you've got like a ridiculous work ethic. But at the same time, do you see the founders that you work with? Would you advise that they are not just so kind of all in all of the time?
I think so. I think I'd advise that they kind of mix up what they're doing about getting in front of people. I'm never the one to kind of say don't be all in because that would definitely be kind of in a glass house, throwing stones basically. But I think the piece for me is that piece where you just mentioned about getting out to networking things, right? People are craving human connection. And actually what it's seen as too much time out of the office, but actually for a founder or for a sales leader, actually it's a really good way to go and connect and test a muscle that, you might not be testing as much when you're always in your kind of office or working from home or, whatever we find ourselves in this kind of digital age, basically. So it's a big thing we've been pushing with customers recently is how are we getting out and building that human connection? How are we getting out in front of our known customers, in front of our pipeline opportunities, which networking and events I'll be attending. And to be honest, it just breaks the week up, right? If you're a founder, if you're anybody having like a day at the office, I've come from Bristol to London today, right? It just breaks the week up and makes it
Yeah,
much more
thank you, by the
enjoyable.
way. Yeah. I hope you got some
Yeah,
meetings
yeah, yeah, it's
while
not
you're here
just
as
for
well,
this.
not
No, no,
just for
no.
me. I wanted to ask you about timing, because that's the thing that I think for if we're thinking about founder-led sales, and let's think about founder-led sales in an early stage startup way, because what I've discovered over the last year is that there are companies that are years and years old that are still in founder-led sales. But let's think about the early stage startups. I think the conundrum that they face is particularly when they're really good at sales. So if they have, if they come into the business with a really like good little black book, and they've able to stick their first million of ARR on the board themselves just from that networking. It's a nightmare for us because there's no breadcrumbs. We don't see anything about how they've done it. But kudos, because these people are amazing at creating revenue. At what point in that journey do you think it's time for them to draw a line in the sand and say, my business is now not going to be a founder-led sales business. I am going to take the first steps into creating a go-to-market strategy with a team behind it, and HubSpot or other CRMs are available, but use HubSpot, please, everyone, and grow up, essentially. When would you think that would be?
I think it's a great question. I think so. There's a couple of things to that. I think first off, the thing that every founder in that situation has to think of: what is the end point here? What do we need to get to in terms of kind of revenue growth, profit, et cetera, and work backwards from that point, basically. And it might be actually just getting to a million ARR, and I can do that through my black book is fine, and I'm going to have a lifestyle business, and that's great. Fine, right? They're in a certain place, but most founders get to that point where they're looking at that end goal and working backwards from that, and they realize that, okay, I've done what I've done, but if we're going to get to a point, we're going to need other people doing the sales. What we try and do is we look at every client on a kind of spectrum of where are you from profitable, repeatable, and scalable, basically. And actually profitable, in that example, great. You've proven you can make profit with this business. That's brilliant. Now, can you do it in a repeatable way time and time again? Have you got a process? Have you got, a go-to-market approach? Have you got the systems in place? Have you got the marketing messaging to actually kind of do that in a repeatable way? There is a point that we assess clients where they're kind of tipping over from repeatable into scalable, where that's when they really need to be looking at kind of sales hires, basically. They've proven they can do something. They've proven they can make money. They've proven they can do it time and time again. But there's a point where it's them educating them. You won't do that and get to the point you want to without tipping into scalable. And that brings with it a whole load of different things that you need to consider as a founder. You need to think about the framework for success, how you're rewarding people, what your culture is, et cetera, all tied to sales is really important, basically.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's a really good structure to have. There'll be things that you need to do between profitable and repeatable around systems, processes. That's probably the point that if you're going to bring somebody in, maybe bring someone in on a consultancy basis to help you with that piece. But then the actual hires, where, as you've said, there's a lot more commitment then. But essentially, what you need to do is clone yourself time and time and time and time and time and time again, and rinse and repeat what you've done between profitable and scalable, sorry, profitable and repeatable, to then make that scale. That's where I feel like a lot of founders get disheartened, because they're like, why aren't they doing it like me? Like, I have invested all of this money. Why is it not working? And often, you mentioned earlier about pipeline. So there's often some kind of top of funnel issues going on there. Maybe not a great marketing strategy, maybe not get good content, whatever. There's often something to fix there. But I often find that founders just assume that they can bring people in, hand them a process and a playbook, and of course they care about the business growth as much as they do, and they're just going to go off and do it. So sales enablement is a big chunk there that I think often totally gets missed,
Yeah.
and it's probably the fault of kind of old school sales trainers who are just quite, the ones that you will have had when your time at Hayes, where it's just soul destroying. How do we almost make sales enablement sexy again so that founders know it's a really good investment to get to that scalable bit?
I think if that's that coaching element that we talked about before, that's right. Bringing, the best practices in sales enablement, but kind of applying it to that founder situation. What you've got to get them to, what a founder has to realize when they're looking to kind of scale their business, is there will be stuff they've done instinctively, and they won't have even thought about it. They won't have kind of recognized that's something they're doing, but there's stuff they do in the way they interact with clients, or how they reach out to the network, or how they close a deal. There's so much you do as a founder because you just can, right? It's my business. It really matters, etc., etc. Like you say, if you then expect somebody to come in and do everything you've done instinctively, you won't. So actually, they won't do that. So actually kind of working with them to go, how do we break that down into something that somebody come off the street, and can pick up and run with, is a really important part. But you have to almost get that founder to realize, take the time to sit down and go, here's what I've learned over the 3-4 years that I've been doing this, and actually how do we apply that to a specific playbook for your business and for that sales team?
Yeah, definitely. And it is just getting them to unpick all of that success, isn't it, retrospectively, and get it documented, because very few of, actually, I call it the breadcrumbs. There's very few breadcrumbs as to how we got to that first million and then that second million. If only we knew, if they were using the CRM properly from day one, we could just go in and get some AI to look at the kind of the trends, but we very rarely have that opportunity. So we've got to start from the point of hiring to then try and make what the founders have built into something that's scalable. So it's a real challenge, and something that I think you just absolutely, sounds like you're nailing for your clients. And I think it's great what you've done. 3 years in any business at the moment is a lifetime. It's tough, right? People are very, very cautious about costs. A lot of startups are not actually getting to that point where they're ready to scale, sadly. And there's a lot of good stuff going on as well, but I think it's super commendable to come from permanent job in sales as a sales director, make a decision because you've spotted something that you think is an issue way before it actually was. Like I say, I'm just jumping on the bandwagon, but yeah, I think you've spotted it way before, and I've actually had just the bravery, I suppose, to actually go and try and fix it and do something about it. And have built what is largely a very successful business, which you've named after yourself. So you must have known it was going to be successful. You really did back yourself
That's just
there
that's just ego,
in
Donna.
every. Well, I tell you what, ego is not a bad thing. It's a bit of a dirty word, isn't it? But I think if you're able to channel your ego in the right way, and and ego is a very important, it's like fear, isn't it? It's a very, very important emotion that, channeled in the right way, can make us very, very successful. And on that note, what's next for you and for Bright Evolve? Like, what is the plan?
So I think this year's been a bit of a kind of, let's make sure we stay still. Let's make sure because we had a really great last year, which is year two, which was really good, kind of, 60% growth, which was fantastic. This year's been right. Let's make sure we can bed that in now and kind of achieve that level of revenue again at the very least, which we're looking like we'll tick off, which is great. So kind of proven some things, tried some things, which was great. We come into next year with a big focus on the product development for our online tool that we do the diagnostic. We want to kind of want to be able to take that to the next level, so that can actually kind of help consult with smaller businesses through some integration of AI, obviously. I mean, I think I lasted pretty long there without talking about AI, and just must be a record, surely.
It can be the enemy in our job, though, can't it? Because I think some naughty founders want to try and replace us with it, and it's not going to happen. But no, I think that it's definitely a place for AI. And goes, I use AI a lot in my role, and I think there's definitely a place for AI in go to market. As a few tools that I use, such as like the Jiminy, Gong, the usual suspects. That their co-pilots are fantastic. So yeah, I think it's definitely jump on it.
Yeah, there's some businesses that I'd really love we could work with, but they're just, too small. They can't afford the kind of consultancy type services. They can't make that commitment. So we're trying to develop the tool so that that can actually support them basically in a kind of much more affordable way. So that's a big thing for us. And then, yeah, next year we've got a couple of plans to kind of grow the team and do some
Yeah.
more stuff. So yeah, it's all good.
And Tom, I think it's because we are aligned on so much of the business stuff. We've ended up talking a lot about the company today. Well, let's remember what the title of the podcast is: Founder Stories. I think we've got a good idea of where you came from, who you are, the things that make you tick. It's very obvious, but I'd quite like to know, just as we finish, what's next for you? Like, what do you want to achieve from your life? What are your ambitions and your dreams?
My goal with everything that I do with the company is to actually build something that, I can hand on to my kids, or, at least kind of helps provide them the future that, they're looking for, basically. At the time I started the business, both my kids had health issues and were missing quite big chunks of school. Personally, a big thing for me was like, I'll set the business up in case they don't recover, don't do their school, and nobody else will give them a job. Thankfully, they're both much better at the academic side of things and have kind of got themselves back in the game. But yeah, so look, my focus is head down in the business, and in that space for the next 4 or 5 years. I'll fit in the odd round of golf, and I'll be happy. And we'll get that to a place where that works, and then hopefully, yeah, get some time to enjoy the life side of life a bit more.
What a fantastic purpose. And yeah, kudos to them as well for just kind of, I suppose that's just comes from them probably being chip off the old blocks, just kind of taking the rough with the smooth, and jumping on and making the best of a bad situation. So, some good learnings there from them that have no doubt not fallen far from the tree, as they say.
My daughter definitely hustles me for money regularly by doing some work, so she's clearly
She's
yeah,
got that
she's clearly learned
entrepreneurial
something.
spirit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so the business will continue to be Bright Evolve
Yeah,
then.
exactly. There you go. See.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed our chat. I think it's really. I don't think this is the end for us. I think we'll definitely stay connected. But in the meantime, if founders are having problems that they think you can solve, I'm assuming LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to you and get in contact and see whether you can help them.
Yeah, LinkedIn. Head over to our website, which is brightevolve.net, and join the mailing list. But yeah, LinkedIn's a great way to contact me. And
Yeah.
I just love nothing more than talking through individual problems and figuring out if we can help or not. So
Yeah, me too. I think it's that's why we do the podcast. I love to hear what's going on in the founder community. I think it's very, very interesting, great space to be in, and long may it continue. Tom, thank you so much.
thanks, Stella.